So we've got two repositories, we can now start using them. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to go back to the client software. I'm going to use the client-side repo. It doesn't really matter which you use. And as we did earlier, I'm going to right click and say Open in Explorer. So the first thing I want to do is start creating a directory structure and adding some files. So I'm just going to add a new folder. And we shall call it Test. Then I'm going to go into that folder and I'm going to add just a plain simple text document. So it should be noted that Git works at the text level, so it really doesn't care what's in the file. So it doesn't matter at this stage whether it's C#, HTML, JavaScript or whatever. Because it works at the text level, changes will just get merged between them. If files can't be merged because they're, for example, binary files or image files, then it does a much more simplistic compare and overwrite, i.e. whichever file is the most up to date, it will overwrite. So what I want to do now is I want to go into my text file and I want to give it some information. Doesn't really matter what we type. Then if I close that and save it, and now if I minimize that, I'm going to go into my client again, and you'll notice now this Changes tab has this little blue dot by it, and that's because, as you saw when we hovered over it, there is one uncommitted change. So if we click that Changes button, we can see what the change is. If I highlight it, it will tell us what the changes were. So notice this plus sign here, so it's saying we added a line, and this is the line that was added. So what we want to do now is we want to commit this to our local machine. So the first thing we can do is we can type in a summary and a description. This helps when you've got lots and lots of commits to try and work out what commits or changes you're particularly looking for. So here we will just say added files for initial state. And then we're going to say take this commit to master. So this has now been committed to our local repository, and the final step is to push that or sync those changes to the server. So if we go and look at our server for now and we go and look at the client-side repo, you'll notice there's nothing in here. There's just the Git attributes. I must have accidentally selected to add one of the Git attributes file. But the point is there's no folder and there's no text file there. So if we go back to our client and quite simply we go up to this sync button. Once that's finished, let's go and look back on the website. We'll just hit that to refresh the page. And now as you can see, we've got our test folder, and if we click that, we've got our text file. Now if we actually click on the text file itself, it opens the file up as we saw earlier, and again we can see what's in the text file itself. Now you'll note these three buttons here. The two of the probably the most used ones are this one on the right, which will delete the file, but the button we're going to use now is this one. This will actually let us edit the file within the browser itself. So if we click that, it actually opens up the edit window. Now this is very useful to do if you want to make quick changes to code without having to do them in your compiler or tool that you're using and upload them. However, generally you would use it in the tool. I'm editing this within the server just so that you can see what happens when two different people edit the same file and how that comes across. So what we can do, we can make some changes. I'm just going to add some changes right to the end of this file here. And then I'm going to add a new line as well. Once we're finished with our change that we want to do, we can click Preview Changes and it will show you what it's going to do. So as you can see, this bit in red means that the line's been taken away, and then the bit in green with the plus means that the line's being added. Now, this is because we're actually updating the entire line rather than change just a portion of a line. It deletes what was there originally and completely replaces it with any changes. Once we're happy with the changes, we can again commit them just like we did from the client, and again we can give it some change information. We're going to leave these two options as they are. We will come to these when we actually start looking at branching, and when we're ready we will simply commit changes. So this has now updated the file at the server side. Again, I'll navigate out and go back in just so that you can see that those changes have taken effect. However, if we look on our in Explorer on our local machine, that file hasn't been updated, and that's because we haven't synced up our client and server. So simply go back to the GitHub client and once again hit the sync button. Once that's finished, let's click the history button, and now we can see our history of the changes that we've been adding, and you can also just notice this bit here which shows the history on a line there. That comes in quite useful when we're looking at branching, and as we click each of these changes we can get a very quick state of what changes we've made. As you can see here, we're only adding or updating one file at a time, but we've now got the two in sync. And that quite simply is how you use the system to update and keep in sync files. And as we mentioned in the introduction, this is really a great way, if for nothing else, than for keeping a backup of your code, but also it means if you're working on some code and you've realized you've made a mistake, it's very easy to roll back to an earlier version and see what changes you've made. In the next lecture, we're going to look at how we do something called branching and merging.